Hi there, we're Sean and Allison from Spoken Garden, and we're partnering with Eden Brothers to help you in your garden.
Yeah, we're going to talk to you about shade gardens today and how to get started growing one in your garden or how to improve the one you already have.
All right, let's get started talking about your shade garden because there are so many beautiful plants that you can add that you may not even be aware of. First of all, you need shade plants. Well, the thing is, there are a lot of light levels that are included in this. Some of your shade plants could range to even more of a partial shade or even partial sunlight. So there are a lot of options for beautiful plants. Another key element to a successful shade garden is matching the plants together, especially if you're planting in containers. You want to make sure that they do have the same light level needs, they have the same water needs, and the same soil needs. Now, another thing to consider with your shade garden, how much space do you have available? Again, are you thinking of planting in containers or do you have ground bed space? And you may be surprised to know that there are lots of shade areas that you could create that you may not have thought about, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So along with spacing considerations for your plants, don't forget about the height, either the height of the plant or the height of the available space or even the shade that's available. Last key element of a successful shade garden is something we love to think about is design. A lot of shade plants can be used to overlap and create different layers of texture because of their foliage or their colors. It makes designing for shade a lot more creative. So it may be very obvious thinking about where shade is available in your garden. You may have a really tall, beautiful shrub that offers shade year-round and all day. So you can think of that as a new shade garden and create a space underneath it. Another place where you'll find shade in your garden is underneath large to medium tree canopies. And also shade can be found on the north side of your home or structure or shed or even garage.
Now, there's a lot of benefits to growing a shade garden, and it can add different dimensions and a feel to your garden, especially with unique and even tropical looking plants that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to grow in your garden, like this canna lily. They can bring lush foliage, exotic flower colors and flower shapes and sizes that can really add to your garden. They can also attract new and normally absent pollinators and wildlife to your garden that you otherwise wouldn't have. And another great benefit of having a shade garden is you can utilize an area that you might normally just keep bare or might just be full of weeds most of the time. Now let's talk about either perceived or actual challenges in or of a shade garden. Now, whether growing in containers, in ground beds, or raised beds, a shade garden can be challenging just because of those low light levels. You might have a short plant list that you could grow in your area, but that list can further dwindle down because of not only your hardiness zone, but what kind of soil you have. Is it the right kind of soil that your short plant list will actually grow in? Do the plants actually need the same amount or relatively same amounts of water? Now, another major challenge of a shade garden is really dry soil and how that soil gets its moisture. Because of overhangs of buildings or of large tree canopies, that soil can stay really dry or become dry fairly easily, and that can be a big challenge. There also could be a lack of nutrients in that soil, and also there could be some extreme pH levels, either really acidic or really alkaline. And the soil could lack some type of soil structure or any structure at all, and it might actually have drainage problems that you'll need to modify to make sure your shade garden survives. So to overcome these challenges, there's a couple easy things you can do. First off is you can always add some type of compost or new garden soil to the soil in your shade area. And this can be because you might have just really tight clay soils and you need to break that up and add the organic matter to it to give it more water holding capacity, better drainage, and nutrient holding capacity. Also, if you have really heavy sandy soils, again, that compost will really add some soil structure to that really sandy soil and help with nutrient holding capacity, water holding capacity, and even drainage. Now, to help with water availability in your shade area, not only will that compost help when you add it to your soils, but also you need to think about bringing in some type of temporary or permanent irrigation system. And if you add mulch over the top, that'll help retain the water from evaporating out the top in any different kinds of conditions that might happen. And another easy way to overcome any challenges really in your shade garden, especially for soil or light levels and space, is to plant your shade plants in containers, and then you can move them around anywhere you want to in the garden, depending on what their needs are and what's going on at that point.
All right, let's get into the fun part of designing a shade garden and talk about some plant examples and some design examples and just looking at plants. So it's good to start off by thinking, what is your goal for your shade garden? Do you want just lots of colors and textures? Do you want to create a shady, tropical kind of oasis? Do you want to fill in an area that just otherwise doesn't look very attractive because maybe you thought nothing would grow there? Behind me and surrounding me here, this is part of our shade garden that's designated in just containers. It's on the north side of a garage and underneath a big tree. So it offers pretty much all day shade in some spots, but mostly partial shade for the whole day. We have shade plants kind of around in different areas of our garden that are shaded by other shrubs or trees. So under those conditions I just mentioned, look around at how many different plant options we have here. Some plants here are used for the foliage, some are flowers, and some of these plants are even indoor plants. It's really fun to think about. You can bring your indoor plants, some of them, outside in your garden. Most of them are hardy in our area here in our Zone 9A garden, but a lot of them are not, so they're just going to be annuals. So adding into the design of your garden for shade is thinking about the different seasons throughout the year and when things either bloom or do they just have foliage all year. Sometimes the foliage will change color, so it looks like you have a changing, evolving garden throughout the year. And when thinking about the seasonality, we love designing with hellebores. They're great shade plants. They bloom in the winter and kind of into the early spring, and they have beautiful foliage year-round in our zone here in 9A. And if you're not really sure where to start or which plants to plant, this partial shade wildflower seed mix from Eden Brothers is a great place to start because it has a lot of different plants all in one seed mix. So let's start talking about some specific examples, including one of our absolute favorites, elephant ears. Look at this beautiful heart-shaped leaf, huge, huge foliage right here. Now, elephant ears are a bulb. They come in a lot of different colors and sizes. This specific elephant ear, these are considered jumbo, so they're going to get really large and really wide, as you can see. Now, we have ours in a container because that just fit our garden needs. If you can plant these in the ground, they can get even bigger than this. So elephant ears can take some partial to full sun as well. They're very versatile. Now they do not flower, but they have this foliage that lasts all summer. And one thing we love about elephant ears is they can actually cause shade for other plants. So that's kind of a fun thing to think about. If you're designing these in a ground bed, you can grow plants underneath them. Now, another fun group of plants to consider are ornamental grasses, and they come in different sizes and shapes and even colors. This beautiful ornamental grass right here, again, we have it planted in a container, but it adds a lot of just color and contrast over here and texture. It's got these really narrow, thin leaves that are variegated with white stripes, and it's just so pretty. So that's a way to add a lot of light, airy texture to your shade garden. And next to this ornamental grass, we've got a rhododendron, which in our garden, we're using it for foliage throughout the whole year, but it does bloom in the spring, beautiful flowers. Now this monster coleus here has been growing since this past spring. It's now fall here in our garden. We love using coleus around the shade garden. They do actually flower as well, but most people grow them for their foliage due to all the different beautiful colors and patterns that they can have. Coleus is another great option if your goal is any type of tropical looking shade garden, or you can pair it with just about anything as long as they have the same needs. Another way to brighten up any shade garden is to plant impatiens. Now, we have different types of impatiens, like right here, these are vacant impatiens, which is a specific brand. They come in a lot of different colors and they just are beautiful. They bloom from spring into the fall. We also grow double impatiens, which have a bigger flower, and they have a little bit more assortment of color as well. Now, coming out of the same container with the impatiens is a sweet potato vine in a light chartreuse color, which just really brightens up a shade garden as well. Now, I want to highlight this container for a second. It's a very large container. It's about 27 inches in diameter, and it's very deep. So we were able to pack a lot of shade plants right back in this corner, which gets almost full shade all day. So there's probably about 5 or 6 plants in here. To be honest, I've lost count, but I wanted to highlight a few things and just some options for design. We have another sweet potato vine here. Now I showed you the chartreuse colored one, but this is a darker colored sweet potato vine, which is really fun to design with. We have a coleus here in that chartreuse color, which really pops in the dark corner. And we added some pops of color into this container using begonias and impatiens. All the plants in here have the same water needs. They're in a container garden soil that has been amended with compost, and they've been growing since this spring. You can see how full and how happy all the plants are in this container, so that's really fun. Now, I want to point out one more plant in here you may not have heard of before. In the back, this is an acanthus mollis. It actually does flower when it has its best conditions met. Now, we're using this fun shade plant as a thriller in the back of this container, and you can see how it just kind of adds that dimension of height, and it sort of shades out some of the other plants in the front, so that offers a little protection for some of those shade plants that might get more sun than they need. Now, other plants we're growing around our shade garden in different pockets and different areas. We have hostas, which are a favorite of ours. They get huge, and we love growing them in containers so we can move them around and create new designs if needed. They do flower as well, so keep that in mind. Fuchsias are a beautiful option for your garden, and they make great hanging plants. So if you have a shaded porch or covered area where you like to hang baskets, try fuchsias if you've never grown them before. They're great shade plants, and the hummingbirds love them. Now, I briefly mentioned begonias as part of your shade garden, and I want to emphasize how fun they are to grow. They add tropical colors if you were into that, and that's your goal. They look beautiful in hanging baskets or in tucked into containers, or even just in their own container or in the ground. So they're very versatile plants. We're growing tuberous begonias. You can see the bright color here. Now we have this white begonia here. We love designing and using white in shade gardens. It really helps brighten up your shade area if that's a concern for you. Another plant grown just for its foliage is ferns. We love adding ferns to the garden. There's so many different sizes and shapes, and their textures are beautiful. Now there are so many more plants we could tell you about. Primroses, cyclamen, astilbe. The list goes on and on. Just have fun with it. Research the plants you like. Make sure they're going to fit in your garden and fit together, especially if they're going into containers. And know that there are so many plants that can work in the shade that you may not have thought about.
Now, if you need more shade garden planting or growing tips, you can always go to EdenBrothers.com and check out their planting guides.
And we hope this video was really helpful for you in helping improve your own shade garden or getting some new ideas. And from us at Spoken Garden and Eden Brothers, thank you for watching.